Hello everyone and welcome back. As you can imagine, it was only a matter of time before we discussed the Charlie Kirk assassination. Now it's been 1 week, or about 1 week, since his murder. All I've been doing is keeping my ear to the ground, observing, watching things unveil, watching how people express themselves, as well as watching the evidence come forward, as people have tripped over that quite a bit. Someone I watch from time to time is Amir Odom, as he covers current events and gives his take. For those that aren't familiar, I'll leave a link to his video in the description down below where he discusses the commonly misunderstood, controversial takes of Charlie Kirk, in case you want to enlighten yourself and look past initial headlines. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to free flow my thoughts in the way that I've structured them. Feel free to hit me in the comments down below, but I don't care if you like, subscribe, none of that crap. I'm not here for that today. We're here to just talk about something. Genuine conversation. I'm going to start off with the things I've noticed. Now, the two things I've noticed is support and blame. Overwhelming support across the world on the basis of Charlie's life and the way he lived and what he inspired, the way that he carried himself against those that disagree, just for the sake of debating, just for the sake of talking, teaching the world that words are not violence. Violence is violence. And that seems like we forgot that. Another thing that I've noticed was, in the sake of support, the overwhelming support towards his wife and kids, sharing their sympathies, knowing that they feel the loss too, that these children are now going to grow up without a father simply because the actions of one fueled by a narrative of many. Additionally to that, the overwhelming support that I've seen is several young men engaging in debate chapters and tables of their own, setting up stations across the United States, willing to debate whoever and whenever, just to be able to engage in conversation where maybe some common ground can be found. That although there might be differences, we're Americans. We can at least find some similarities. And the last notion of support that I saw was prayer, vigils, quiet contemplations celebrating Charlie Kirk's life and mourning his loss. It was quite a beautiful thing to see because we saw it all over the United States and we saw it all over the world, where different countries setting up their own memorials for an American that they've never met. I think that means something. And I think that's a relevant piece of information when going into the second thing that I've noticed, which was blame. Now, out of the four things that I've noticed in reference to blame was Charlie Kirk himself, the shooter, a narrative, and mental health. Now, when it comes down to Charlie Kirk himself, people will think whatever they think about him. They blame this on him because they believe him to be a hateful, violently inciting person, a monster. Call him racist, Nazi, bigot, anti-trans, homophobic, misogynistic, whatever. The issue is that he has supporters from every single one of these groups, so it begs to differ that this is debatable. To be fair, it just seems like these people have differing opinions and they have to label it as a monster in order to justify their own. Now, two of the more common arguments that I see that state that justifies his assassination is his belief in the Second Amendment and his pitch on empathy. Now, when it comes down to the Second Amendment, he believed in order to preserve the Constitution and our rights, that sacrifice might happen, or sacrifice might be necessary, or that the gun violence that exists in the United States is worth it if it means that we keep our Constitution intact. Essentially, he was advocating for one of our amendments and preserving the Constitution. But the one thing that I'll say to that is advocating for the Constitution is not the same as advocating for political violence. I believe these are two different paths. But because he believes in our right to bear arms, people believe, well, then you have the right to be killed by it. And funny enough, if Charlie Kirk was alive today, he'd still believe in it. And I think that's lost on people. The other most common point is empathy. There was a point where Charlie Kirk discusses empathy as a weaponized term for a political appeal, rightfully so. And he says that it's a new age term that he doesn't really believe in. People cut it there and use that against him and say, if he had no empathy, then why should I have sympathy? Well, that's where you'd be wrong. Charlie Kirk believes in sympathy, and he believes in sympathy over empathy. And he specifically stated so. And he thinks that sympathy is a far more useful tool when bridging the gap of our differences. The common thing that I've noticed with anybody that I've talked to is that they lack the context. Some people just disagree, and that's fine. Some people don't really feel anything about his loss, and that's fine too. But the fact that I see people blaming this man without even fully understanding what they know, and it's only based on what they feel, it's a bit damning. Another orientation of blame falls on the shooter. People were concocting all kinds of rhetoric, saying he was a far-right MAGA type, only to be completely proven wrong, and it's the opposite. He was far-left, believed Charlie Kirk was a hateful person and his hate needed to end, and had the sexual partner that he had and believed in the things that he believed and wrote the things he wrote on his equipment. If you want to do a little research, I suggest you look it up. He is far from anything related to conservatism, although he did grow up in a Mormon conservative home from my understanding. But that doesn't always mean that that's his automatic affiliation. The issue I had with it was that was a quick narrative. But that's nothing close to the narrative that's truly the problem. People can blame individuals, sure, but that's nothing compared to the irresponsible leftist media narratives that have been ongoing, calling all conservatives racists, bigots, Nazis, and whatever Charlie Kirk was also called. Using powerful language to twist opposing viewpoints started to become the norm, as Charlie Kirk, arguably a moderate conservative, was consistently called a far-right fascist leader without even being a politician or advocating for fascism. The second you have a differing opinion against this massive sweeping narrative, you're viewed as something negative. And it's not just news outlets or legacy media, it's streaming platforms, development studios, even psychologists, teachers, therapists, counselors. It's all over the place, fueled by this emotionally intense narrative that's not really backed by pragmatism. It's not backed by context. It's just, you think differently than me, so therefore you should be insulted. I think it's this kind of irresponsible narrative that is inciting violence indirectly. It's causing people to think that this is a real problem. Perhaps this narrative is the problem. And I think that's what makes it irresponsible, hence why a lot of blame is oriented to it. If we didn't have these people spewing these things that they were spewing without any consequence, perhaps people wouldn't feel the need to take it into their own hands like they're so suggesting subliminally. And let's be real, it is a subliminal message. When even streamers are posting addresses and suggesting what people should do and with what weapon they should do it and what should happen to these people. And I think this orientation of blame should be primarily considered. Now, the last blame that I saw was mental health. And obviously, mental health is definitely a crisis in the United States, considering that we are probably one of the most privileged and developed countries. So naturally, we're going to have more issues that are oriented towards these kind of things. If you don't believe that that's associated with it, go ahead and look up some studies that prove that countries that are more privileged often endure more mental health crises. We're bored. We already have so many of our needs fulfilled. So the next thing we start hyper-focusing on is where we belong and where we believe we belong and what we should think of ourselves. I think that's a problem in the United States because we have institutions that hyper-focus on validation and self-esteem. And so we allow that to integrate into almost everything we do and how we treat people, not realizing that all we're doing is going towards a culture of sheltering and not a culture of exposure, where exposure is where we truly learn. People that think that mental health is a problem, I agree, but I would also argue that we're becoming less and less equipped to handle it because more and more people are being taught that validation is more important than criticism. And I think that's a problem in itself. Now, obviously, going beyond the things that I've noticed, what does it all mean and what happens next? To those that are scared, fearful of retaliation. First thing that I'm going to say is Charlie Kirk wouldn't have wanted that. And I think that people that believe Charlie Kirk to be a martyr as he caused overwhelming support of the nation, he wouldn't want that. Secondly, if you anticipated some grand form of retaliation and civil war or what have you, perhaps you didn't fully understand the other side. Perhaps you didn't fully understand Charlie Kirk. Perhaps you didn't fully understand his supporters. Perhaps you didn't fully understand conservatives. Perhaps the narrative that I previously discussed has turned you into this puppet that simply says the same thing and is supposed to feel the same thing. But I think there's a reason as to why we didn't see it. This is nothing like what happened after George Floyd, where people are destroying their communities and looting on the basis of whatever the hell you want to call that. It's not going to happen. But the mockery will continue because you have people that can't help themselves but cast stones over and over and over again. It makes you really wonder who the tolerant side is. Now, that's not to say that the right didn't have some smaller groups doing things. True, but I think that they were mostly condemned, as I would condemn them as well, because any acts of political violence for any reason, it shouldn't be condoned. The mockery is going to continue as the left has continued to call for the death of not only Charlie Kirk, but his family as well, and how they've been flaunting a list of who's next. It really calls into question, is this a both sides argument? In our generation, it is not. In our generation, this is no longer a both sides argument. One side is clearly enacting more need for political violence or belief that it is more acceptable than the other side is. And there's graphs that literally came out after the assassination that prove it. The entirety of the left isn't to blame, but how much more is the mean going to continue to shift? And so companies are letting go a lot of the people that are mocking the death of an American, not realizing that to mock the death of an American is immoral. And so they're viewing it as their own interpretation of cancel culture. Expressing the First Amendment just means you won't get arrested. It It doesn't mean that corporate interests and your morals won't conflict. Companies can let go whoever they please whenever they want. But when conservatives or anyone on the right was getting canceled, they were getting canceled for saying factual or scientific beliefs. A lot of them got canceled for saying that there's only two genders or believing that there's only two genders, male and female. Getting canceled for laughing over an American assassination isn't equivocal. So I'm going to end this video with a message. First and foremost, to the Charlie Kirk family. I'm sorry for your loss. And I know that navigating through to this next chapter is going to be tough. There's a massive gap now. A gap that was Charlie Kirk and was taken from you from a narrative that you don't deserve. Hopefully that you have the friends, community, and family that can help you get through this dark time and understand that this man was loved and loved by many. My message to the lost or the people that think it's funny to laugh at Americans' death. The one thing that you need to understand is that you shared similarities with Charlie Kirk in one way or another. Either that you're a human being, that you are also a man, that you're American, that you're a political idealist. The only difference is that Charlie Kirk was a Christian, a husband, a father. And although we may have a lot of differences upon our life, there are similarities that we can typically stand on. And understanding that you celebrated the death of an American is un-American. And perhaps you should go back to understanding what being American means. I understand that there's a lot of violent rhetoric surrounding one person. I understand that people are often jealous that he has this much support. They don't understand it. Perhaps, like I said before, maybe there's a side of this that you don't really know. And I think the best thing that we can all do is venture out and get out of our comfort zones and to be able to embrace narratives that we don't fully understand. I think that what Charlie Kirk inspired a lot of people to do was to go outside of their comfort zones and discuss politics or ideals with people that may not agree with them. I think that we fixate too much on who agrees with us as a way to keep ourselves validated and comfortable. You see it with streamers, you see it with regular people, you see it all over Reddit, that's for damn sure. I also don't need you coming to me with your favorite streamers' talking points. Develop your own opinion off your own research instead of regurgitation. I think we need to stop that. I think that's a little cowardly. I think it's okay to get out there in the world and see what people think. Even if you still don't agree, just to see where they're coming from and see why it is they got there. And I think that's okay. I think that's the whole point of having the liberty to be able to express and effectively express your own thoughts and opinions. That's the freedom of expression. It was a sad day in America when we lost someone just because they didn't share the opinion of another group, and that other group decided to demonize it as much as they could until they incited violence or indirect violence for someone to take advantage of, become an opportunist, and take it seriously. It's terrible. And I think that we're better than that. I want to think that we're better than that. But moving forward, this is my judgment. Those that can't help but emotionally respond to a differing opinion are immature. You haven't grown up. You're Peter Pan. And all you want to do is stay safe. But you can't take up more responsibility until you do. Otherwise, you remain weak and fragile, and you're not going to be able to move forward. And I think that this moment shined a light on the immature. It shined a light on the people that are lost. And because I seem to understand the dire state that you're in, you have my sympathy. And I hope that one day you find a better version of you that judges yourself adequately to make yourself actually want to rise above and do something more with your life. Trust me, you have the potential to do it. And I hope for your sake and those around you that you can find it. I know that institutions have taught you to hyper-focus identity, but the issue with focusing on identity or cultural identity, it assumes character and it makes you operate in the basis of your identity, which is discriminatory, and it doesn't allow you to build a version of you that exists regardless of the environment that you're in. You need to understand that that's a limiter to your own maturity, and it's an immature narrative that you don't have to follow. You can outgrow the people around you that keep you there if that's what's going on. I believe in that too, but you also got to do that as well. That's all I got to say, so I'll just end it there. I understand Shoe on Head dropped a video as well. I plan to react on that, don't worry. I would like this to be the last time we cover this before we all can get together and move on. Now, there was something that on the internet, it was a AI generated piece, but the prompt was, what would Charlie Kirk say about his assassination following his death? I'm going to go ahead and play that at the end, but before I leave, thank you everyone for watching the video. Hit me in the comments down below. Feel free to talk to me. God bless America, and rest in peace, Charlie Kirk.
First, I want you to know I'm fine, not because my body is fine, but because my soul is secure in Christ. Death is not the end, it's a promotion. Don't waste 1 second mourning me. I knew the risks of standing up in this cultural moment, and I'd do it all over again. Second, do not let this violence divide us further. The enemy wants chaos, fear, and retaliation. Don't give it to them. Instead, double down on truth. Double down on courage. Double down on your faith and on your families. That is how you honor me. Third, Remember this, America is worth it. Free speech is worth it. Fighting for the unborn, for families, for sanity in a culture gone mad, it is all worth it. So dry your tears, pick up your cross, and get back in the fight. Do it with joy, do it with strength, and never ever let evil think it won.